Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Kyle Mox. I'm Associate Dean for National Scholarships here at Arizona State University, where I direct the Office of National Scholarship Advisement, along with my very talented, very committed staff. I am also the designated Fulbright Program Advisor for Arizona State, which means I am the main point of contact for this program. And so today we're going to be talking about the Fulbright U.S. Student Program. I've also got some guests with us here that are happy and excited to meet you. I've got some of our ONSA staff here. So Kai Johnson here and be managing the waiting room, managing the chat. I saw Emily Rapp enter the chat. She is one of our advisors, works primarily with folks that are applying for graduate degree awards. I didn't catch to see if there's any other ONSA folks on this call. Great. And joining us today as well are two of our former ASU students who are Fulbrighters now. Introduce yourself real quickly. Tell us what award you won and where you ended up going. So, Nia, would you like to say hello?
Hi everyone. Sorry, I'm squatting a mosquito from here in Kampala, Uganda. I got the Fulbright ETA award and spent my first year here in Kampala, but I was renewed for a second year as a Fulbright mentor. So I am still in my position at the American Center, but I also mentor ETAs who are in Mozambique and Kenya.
Great. And we'll hear more about Nia's adventures in a bit. Chandler, how about you? Where are you zooming in from?
Hello, everyone. I'm sitting at home in Budapest, Hungary. I won the 2024 through 2025 Fulbright Student Award. I'm finishing my master's uh, at ELTA University for cybersecurity and computer science. It's been a great opportunity and one I hope the best and you all can have.
Great. Thanks so much. Yeah, today our objectives are pretty clear. We want to provide a general introduction to this program, right? Help you understand the basics of it and see where you fit, essentially. Everyone's coming to this meeting from slightly different perspectives, different backgrounds, different objectives. And most importantly, we just want to get you off and running. This is a large program. It's complicated. There's a lot of countries. There's a lot of rules. And a lot of variations on things, and it can be a little overwhelming when you're getting started. So our hope here is that to give you a little confidence and certainty in terms of what to do first, right? This session is not designed to answer every question that'll arise. It's not intended to be a replacement for advising. We have a pretty thorough and well-developed advising pathway for you all to follow. And so that'll hopefully become clear as we get into it today. So just know this, first of all, Fulbright is one L and one word. And so I do get a lot of emails from folks with two L's, as if it is full of brightness, and even two words. But yeah, this is named after William Fulbright, who was a member of Congress from Arkansas. It was created in 1946, shortly after the end of World War II, with a pretty clear intention of bringing people together to engage in academic and intellectual exchange, with the idea that if we got to know each other a bit better, maybe we wouldn't have as many world wars. And so far, it's stuck, right? There hasn't been a follow-up to World War II just yet. And so I put that squarely on Fulbright. It is the largest and best-known academic exchange program in the world. So from time to time, I get the question, oh, this is cool. Is there anything else like this? And the simple answer is no. Why would there be? Fulbright awards 1,800 scholarships per year to students. It gives awards as well to foreign Fulbrighters who are coming to the U.S. There's also programs for scholars, so your faculty members are also applying for Fulbright awards. So it's very large, very comprehensive, very flexible, and I actually think it meets the needs of most people if we do our homework. It is managed by the Institute for International Education, which has been doing so for going on 70 years. Very competent organization, very committed, and our partners in this entire process. The other thing to know is that Fulbright is a multilateral program. So it operates in coordination with the Fulbright commissions and embassies in 140 different countries. So as you're writing your Fulbright application, your audience is not simply an American audience. It's not just readers who are sitting on the United States side of things. You're also writing to try to persuade folks in the host country that you would be a good partner in that exchange, right? And so ultimately, the final choices are made by the host countries, right? Which I think is an important thing to keep in mind, and it actually is what differentiates Fulbright from a large number of awards. They got the mission to foster mutual understanding between nations through educational and cultural exchange, advancing knowledge and improving lives worldwide. So, I highlighted the really important things, and I think mission statements are essential when you're looking at a major grant or award like this. You want to take a look at what does this program think of itself? What does it see as its mission in the world? And as much as possible, we want to mirror that language. And so um, the good news, the funny thing about Fulbright is it's largely agnostic about whatever it is you want to do. As long as it's feasible, as long as it seems to put some value into the world, they're fine with it. You could want to, you can study the breeding habits of hamsters in the Syrian desert or didgeridoo performance, or engage in genetic testing to unravel a cure for cancer. Any of those things are perfectly fine with them, so long as they're producing knowledge of value to someone. But it's the mutual understanding that has to be there, right? The exchange aspect has to be there, and improving lives aspect has to be there. So if you propose a project that basically puts you in a lab for 120 hours a week, and basically you go from your flat to the lab and back, that's not a Fulbright project, right? Fulbright proposal needs to include community engagement. It needs to include awareness of how the cultural context affects what you'll be doing. And it needs to include some long-term vision for how you are going to continue this mission once you've returned. What do you get? So it's a fully funded international experience, meaning that they would provide housing, travel, a living stipend, emergency medical insurance, in some cases, additional funding for research, in some cases, tuition support. It really just depends on the award. But the simple answer is it's as much as you need. Their stated objective is that you are able to live a quote comfortable student lifestyle, which thinking about my student lifestyle sounds pleasant because I wouldn't call mine comfortable, right? They actually in recent years have reduced the number of awards slightly, so they're able to increase the amount of funding per recipient, which I think is a great decision to make. In terms of specific dollar amounts, that varies wildly by country, right? And so the cost of living in Kyoto is much different than it is in Ulaanbaatar, much different than it is in Nairobi, and so on and so forth, right? So that information, by and large, is clearly laid out in the country summaries. If you're curious about specific dollar amounts, at the end of the day, it kind of doesn't matter. It's enough, right? And in some cases, more than enough. The other, and I think probably longer term and more important benefit is the acceleration that occurs here, academic and professional acceleration. You are going to grow and change as a person. You're going to move closer towards your stated goals. It could be something, tactile, something concrete, like in Chandler's case, actually completing a master's degree, or it could be proficiency. And for most people, that proficiency is in cross-cultural communication and exchange. For anyone who's considering a long-term global career, Fulbright would be an essential step. For anyone that's considering careers in the federal service, this could be an essential step. And so anyone who's thinking about getting engaged in research or musical performance or theater, right? All of these, a year spent focused on one particular task, obviously is professional acceleration. That cultural immersion, that global perspective that you gain is invaluable. Almost every Fulbright alumni that I talk to at one point or another says something along the lines of, it was the best year of my life. It was a turning point in my life, and no hyperbole there. But it can't not change you to spend this amount of time immersed in another culture. And, students write that all the time. It's boilerplate. I've read it thousands of times. But the thing is, it's true, right? And so your perspective after you return from Fulbright will be different than it was going in, and in a good way. And so the other benefits, of course, are just those lifelong affiliations that you build, the network that you build. You become part of the Fulbright Alumni Network. In addition, you have established strong relationships with the people in your host country, and these people could go on to become collaborators in your future research or connections in your professional network, or just people that you maintain contact with who shape your life. And so all of these things are what I would consider benefits of the program. The other thing I want you to remember or take away from this is that we do win. ASU is actually one of the top producing Fulbright institutions in the U.S. for the past 20 years, 19 of the last 20 years, we have been identified as a top producing institution among doctoral granting universities. That's 156 winners in 10 years, right? Just to put it in perspective. In that time frame, that rates us about 16th overall among all universities, but fourth among public universities. So who's our peer group? Our peer group tends to be Ivy League schools and elite, private institutions like Stanford, MIT, and Chicago. Places that have the inverse of our undergraduate admission rate, which is 90%. We are competing toe to toe with schools that have a 4, 5, and 6% undergraduate admission rate. I bring this up because it is very clear evidence to support the claim that ASU as the new American university is an experiment that's working, right? We can do excellence to scale. We can provide our students the opportunities that you find at more selective and far more expensive and exclusive as an exclusionary institutions. So our average selection rate over our operating time frame has been nudging towards 30%. The overall average selection rate for Fulbright across all programs is closer to 20%. So there is a substantial advantage to working through our office in terms of your odds of success, right? And there is honestly no secret to this, right? It just comes with a lot of hard work and then tons of support from our faculty, staff, and administration. The other thing that I hope you remember from today is that there's two basic species of Fulbright. One is a study research grant, which, as the name implies, would put you in a position to study something or to research something. There are some subspecies or of those, right? You could be pursuing an independent research project, such as the hamster project I'd mentioned earlier, or you could be pursuing graduate study, as Chandler is doing, or you could be pursuing a creative or performing art. There are also a number of specialized unique awards that individual countries offer, and those are on a case-by-case basis, and sometimes you can find some really interesting ones. The ETAs, English Teaching Assistantship, and I emphasize the assistantship there, that you would be serving in an assisting role with a primary instructor in an English classroom abroad. The primary function of ETAs, and certainly Nia can talk more about her experience in a moment, is to serve as an ambassador, to provide context for the study of English, and thinking about how it's spoken and used in the United States. So a lot of times ETAs are designing lesson plans on American history, culture. Halloween tends to be very popular, and why not, right? It's an awesome holiday. But I've got numerous pictures from our ETAs, in Laos or in South Africa or South America, with a room full of school children who are dressed up in Halloween costumes, right? That's just one example of something different and interesting we do in the US, but there are numerous opportunities for you to share your own experiences, your own interests, your own talents with people in another community. ETAs also work across the entire lifespan. So if your preference is to work with primary school students, that's an option in many countries. If your preference is to work with secondary school students or even college age students, that can be an option in various countries as well. In both cases, both species, language proficiency may or may not be required. It depends on the country and it varies by country. So in the study research chute, like I said, you can pursue an independent research project in affiliation with a local scholar. So in almost all cases, you would need to identify a partner abroad that you'd be working with. You can pursue a graduate degree at a foreign university, which means that you simply apply for admission. Engage in a creative performing art, again, with a local artist, with a master practitioner, some justification for going. And as I mentioned, there's some unique awards from country to country, and those tend to be aligned with that country's interests, right? The biggest part of the ETA, as I mentioned, is that community engagement and that ambassadorial component, right? That is essential. And so as we start to think about our scholars' experiences, be thinking about that. And as we get into the criteria a little bit, be thinking about that. Because what I really enjoy about Fulbright and why I like to work with it so much is that I think anyone who has spent their time well during their college years can mount a strong Fulbright application if they're willing to be thoughtful and if they're willing to think about what value they have to bring to the world, and they're willing to think about where they want to go and how this experience fits in. And so we all have things that we do or that we're interested in that represents our unique American experience that somebody in another country is interested in and excited to hear about, right? And a lot of times people are like, well, I don't know what I would share. I mean, uh, no, I promise you, every single one of us has a story to share. So, enough about me. Let's talk about people that have actually been through this experience. And so, Nia, I'm happy to turn it over to you. You brought us a number of smiley pictures of your time as an ETA.
Yes. Hi everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day or night wherever you are. My Fulbright ETA experience in Uganda is kind of a full circle moment for me. Um, I was previously a Peace Corps volunteer in Uganda in the east of the country from 2017 to 2020. So it was really great to come back and work in a different area of the country and also engage in community projects and get to know a lot more behind the embassy and the U.S. diplomacy machine, which is a really big part of working at American centers in the ETA experience. Um, so just kind of like overview from the pictures. My day in the life of an ETA is just kind of random all the time, and that is different from country to country. But here in Uganda, it's very much you make it as you go along. So I've been to Lit Fest, literature festivals in Kampala. That's me with an author with the cover of her book. I work with my secondary project is working with local arts communities, and I also have worked with EdUSA, which is a part of the US Embassy that seeks to give people interested in applying to American universities very quality information. So did a tour in the east and the west of the country, speaking at various high schools and universities, um, and letting them know how to apply. I also get people from universities here that want to know how to build a strong resume or to interview well. So, very early in my ETA experience, I was at the medical school at Makerere University, which is the largest university in East Africa, to, meet students there and help them to write better essays and narratives and resumes. And down in the far right corner, that's me revisiting my old Peace Corps site with the new Peace Corps volunteer there. So that was a great moment. I got to take the embassy with me along to that journey. So that's just been a short snapshot of what I do. If there are some questions that you guys have for me about the ETA experience, I would love to answer them. Um, but I'll stop there unless there's some questions, Kyle and Kai, that you wanted me to specifically address.
Yeah, we can circle back. I've got some ideas for things that we could unpack a little bit, but I'd love to hear from Chandler, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So those of you listening and thinking, be ready to think about the questions you'd like to hear Nia and Chandler and anyone else answer. So Chandler, I'd like to talk a little bit about your experience.
Oh yeah, of course. Hello, everybody. So like I said, I got my Fulbright roughly about 2 years ago. So Fulbright covered the first 9 months of my studies, and the second year I've been self-funded. So I just, if you plan to do graduate studies with a odd schedule like that, it's more than acceptable. You just have to let them know about it. The Fulbright Commission here in Hungary has been an amazing resource to help me in the country, whether it's with personal struggles like with a laptop repair that went bad, questions about university or visa. They've been a great help. I have a photo of us in the top left. Every month we get together and we'll go do a cultural experience, whether it's this one, which was visiting the site where East Germans first crossed over the Iron Wall, which I thought was a very interesting and cool experience to have. Or in the top right, my wife and I went to a Hungarian festival in the city of Mohacs, where they dress up in these big costumes, where his legend says they fought off the Turkish invaders and welcomed in the spring. Uh, Here on my Fulbright experience, I've met so many amazing people. I've made contacts from top universities, uh, friends I plan to keep for hopefully the rest of my life. And the international experience it has so many layers to it, whether it's just the cultural experiences, the simplicities of just shopping in a different grocery store, or even my university. I thought going to a Hungarian university, I would be with a majority Hungarian students. I'd say the Hungarians make up about 60% of my classroom. In my studies, I've met people from Azerbaijan, from Kyrgyzstan, from Kenya, from Colombia, from all over the world. I wouldn't have thought that to have been the case. But it's been an amazing opportunity, allowing us to travel to, like I said, meet amazing people. I during this time have switched my interest from wanting to be a practitioner into a researcher because of the people I've met during this time frame and the little bit of research I did in conjunction with my study grant as well.
Mhm. Wonderful. I mean, a good question for either or both of you. If you can remember, what motivated you to apply in the first place? What piqued your interest and what kind of tipped you over into saying, yeah, I think this is something I want to pursue?
For myself, I did not even know that Fulbright had the study slash research portion. It was a ASU faculty member who let me know about it. I was only informed of the ETA side. I went and spoke with ONSA. ONSA is the best resource ever. I'm not just saying this because I'm doing this panel. They truly were in a boatload of help. And being able to speak with you guys at ONSA, with Fulbright alumni, and see the not only the career progression that it could bring, but also like the network and the experiences. It was a hard opportunity to say no to.
Right.
Yeah, prior to coming to ASU and doing my master's there, had worked internationally. As I mentioned, I was Peace Corps volunteer. I'd worked in China for 4 years. And so I was just looking to continue that trajectory professionally. And I learned about ONSA like very late in the game. And I applied to this Fulbright very late in the game. But they were super helpful. And I just kind of went to them and said, hey, I know the deadline is 2 weeks away, but how can I, craft an application? And they provided a lot of like writing, resource help, and obviously interview preparation. That was really helpful to me in winning the award.
Great. Yeah, there's a lot of great questions in the chat that I think we'll kind of wander through naturally as we talk a little bit more about eligibility and selection criteria, and I'll be curious to hear Nia and Chandler both weigh in as well. The basic eligibility for Fulbright is that you're a U.S. citizen and that you have a bachelor's degree in hand by the time you leave to go on your award. So what that would mean is if you're an undergraduate, in most cases, you could not receive your bachelor's degree any later than for an ASU student, spring of 27. We generally don't do summer graduations, but technically August of 27. In some countries, they start later, right? So many Southern Hemisphere countries wouldn't start their next academic cycle until January of 28. In that case, yeah, you could push your graduation date a little bit. I've had students do that, but simply put, that's the soonest you could apply. So if you're a graduating senior or a rising senior, now is your first opportunity. And I keep emphasizing first because we have many people who apply later. They take a couple years off to go work. They pursue another degree. They go to a Peace Corps or something like that. That's not when you have to apply. If you're a current graduate student, by definition, you have a bachelor's degree in hand. That's how you got in. And so that would be eligible as well. It does not close until you actually have a PhD in hand. So you could apply um, ABD, even if you've already defended your thesis, as long as you have not conferred that PhD, you're still eligible to apply for Fulbright. So anything in between those two poles, you'll notice there's no minimum or maximum age. There's no other GPA or anything like that. There's no other criteria for eligibility for Fulbright, which means it's very accessible. So as I mentioned, rising and graduating seniors, current graduate students, and ASU alumni. Those are kind of our three big buckets of applicants for the most part. Um, in terms of the important criteria, meaning, what is it the national screening um, committees are actually looking for? They're looking for three core things. Now, if you go onto the Fulbright U.S. student site and start digging around trying to find selection criteria, you won't find anything by that name, right? They don't have hard and fast selection criteria because those preferences do vary from country to country. Some countries might be looking for only master's students, or they might have a strong preference for engineering students. Important to read the details. But by and large, Fulbright does value and has very strong selection preferences for these three things: a strong, feasible project or purpose. So let's pause there a little bit. Chandler or Nia, if you want to think about how did you think about feasibility and clarity of purpose as you were approaching your applications? What the challenges you had there, what do you felt that you did that worked particularly well there?
Yeah, I go ahead and speak on that. I looking for a country fit was one of my first and foremost things. I have a dependent, my wife, who has been on this trip with me, and I wanted to have it have some familiarity with her, be comfortable, but also take her outside of the comfort for the grand new experience. Like Dr. Mock said, I looked for countries that wanted me and that I thought I could provide value to. I'm a computer science student, so I looked for STEM heavy. I tried to find universities that had cool projects that wanted new grad students from all over. And I was able to find a project here called Code Checker that is now just led me with some wonderful opportunities. But I tried to find the best fit, and Hungary has been very kind to me in return. Whether it's the university, just people here, I on a Fulbright, it's hard to go wrong in general.
I actually know your commissioner fairly well. He's a really hands-on guy, very outgoing. Yeah. Nia, what about you?
Yeah. On my side, I really looked through the country.
Huh?
Maybe more entry level people. And I think I had narrowed it down to Uganda and Mauritius. And I really sat down and I was like trying to imagine my life in both places. Obviously, Uganda is a place that I have experience in, and Mauritius was like this wild card. So after like, doing some deliberation, I decided that I do want to return to Uganda, and it was just about making the case that, okay, if you're going back to this place, what's going to be different? And that's where a lot of help came in from ONSA. And when I wrote about my experience in Uganda and how it's going to translate, but also be different this time around, they were able to like, take a look and say, this is a strong application.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. And it kind of addresses one of the questions that popped up in the chat is, is it expected or is it a bad thing that you've had any previous experience in the host country? And the answer to that is the answer that's very similar to almost every other question you'll ask, which is, well, it depends, right? And so it depends, one, on how you frame it. It also depends on how significant that previous experience is. So if you had lived there and worked there, meaning that you had an address, you were getting mail, like all the, you were living an adult life, they would probably consider that too much experience. If you were there on a study abroad, if you're there on military deployment, if you're there on a Peace Corps deployment, anything like that, they wouldn't consider that to be too substantial. Now, that being said, you also don't want to overplay your hand to say, oh, no sweat, I'm super comfortable there. I won't have any problems, right? Because Fulbright actually does want this to be a growth experience. And so if you do plan to return to an area with which you have some previous experience, you'd want to make it clear, what's left on the table. Yeah, that earlier experience was formative, but I'd still like to do this, or I'd still like to do that, or my work isn't yet finished, right? Um, in some regions or parts of the world, I actually think previous experience is almost required, depending on your level of comfort. If you've never traveled outside of the US and you put forth an application to go to Timor-Leste to be an ETA, as a reader, I would have some concerns like, are you prepared for such a big jump? That's a long ways away. It's not, it's only recently an independent country. Are you familiar with, what's going on? And so in some cases, we'd like to draw on that previous travel experience, but on the other hand, the Fulbright reviewers really want to give this opportunity to somebody that hasn't had a big shot yet. So it's a little bit of a balance there. So that was a good question in the chat, and I think we addressed that a little bit. The other thing, the bullet point there, we talked a lot about fit. And this is a big part of what we do in our advising sessions is talk about how do we read through the country summaries to figure out a good fit for you. And also, what do you know about this country? What's going on there? What can you make a good argument for why you, with your interest and background, need to go there as a next step? But the other bullet point that's really important is to think about our preparedness to engage in meaningful exchange. One of the other questions in the chat had to do with leadership, right? Is that a criterion? Not as such, right? But I do think that's a big part of preparedness to engage in exchange. You cannot be a wallflower. You cannot be an introvert in the strictest sense of being an asocial introvert. It's fine to be a social introvert. You just need some breaks. But you have to have some ideas for how you're going to engage with your host country, and the instructions are not provided. So, Chandler or Nia, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your efforts to engage with your host communities while you're there that were kind of separate from your primary project.
Yeah, I think at this point, my focus is mostly on my community project and working at the American Center. But I, when I was here previously, had worked in the arts and had been engaged in the arts community. So I think my community engagement idea at the time that I applied was really tied to building a connection between understanding, education and the arts. And I think that translated very well because I, had already explained that I was a part of this community and I'm growing in this community. And so I think that was another factor of my application that
Mhm.
came across really well. But as a person that also has interviewed Fulbrighters, ETAs coming into Uganda, and also foreign scholars going to the US and Uganda, um, those parts of the application are really critical. I think a lot of people in their applications tend to say, oh, I want to share, food or do holiday stuff. I want
Mhm.
to share my love of Halloween, which is great. But I would challenge people to really think about something that's intentional, that's going to um, build the community that you're going to engage in. And a part of that is understanding what that community is. And if you haven't been to the place before, it's really important to kind of talk to people on the ground and get a sense of, what's there so that in your application, you're writing something that makes sense. I've read applications of people who want to come to Uganda and work in soup kitchens, but there are no soup kitchens in Uganda, So that's something to think about in your applications.
Absolutely.
My apart from making friends with the university and taking part in university events, uh, I've tried to, my first few weeks here, the Danube River flooded. It was it floods about once every decade, and my luck, it was just right after arrival. So I had the opportunity to volunteer to fill sandbags, and I was a part of the National Guard for 6 years, and so I did the same thing in Flagstaff before. And very oddly enough, the experience carried over. I was able to, since I've done similar work, able to guide people what to do, teach them how to use the machines, as the machinery was fairly similar, and stop the riverbank from flooding the local shops, which was a nice experience. And I've also had the opportunity to work with the American Corner, which I'm not to get into the nitty gritty, but it's my understanding, U.S. embassy subsidiary, which helps to spread American culture to other countries. So I go in, I speak with people, just help them practice their English, talk to them about
Thank you. I had a little interruption in my signal there for a second. So, um, one of the takeaways I hope you all are gaining from this is that, you're bringing something of yourself to this application. It's not enough to say, oh, I hope I'll be able to volunteer, or I hope I'll be able to engage meaningful in cultural events, or eat the food, or see the architecture. You've got to say something that's unique to this country, and you've got to talk about things that are unique to you. And so really, that's part of what we'll do through the process too, is really unpack your own experiences and goals, and really think about, what is the application that only you could write. So where do we go from here? I didn't update the date on this slide. Let's just pretend it's March 24th. And so today is the virtual follow-up to Fulbright Day. The application actually opened yesterday. So it is open as of today. The information on the Fulbright site is up to date. We're still absorbing updates and new things. There's 140 different countries, and there's minor changes every year. So some new awards and some awards have dropped off. And as well, you can find competition statistics on there if you're curious about the general competitiveness of one country over the other. The other date to be concerned with is May 31, and we're a good bit out from that, but that's our priority intake deadline. If you complete your intake advising meeting before May 31, we can guarantee you a certain level of access, a certain number of draft reviews, full access to our example bank, alumni events and workshops and things that we have planned throughout the summer. So I think sooner is better than later, and this will not surprise anyone who's ever worked in an educational setting. There is a very strong correlation between the people who start early on this and their odds of success later. I think Nia is an outlier, of course, but as you can tell, she also came into it very well prepared, had done her homework, had very good arguments for why she was going where she was going, right? It's very difficult to start a Fulbright application flat-footed in August. So, and also it's far more pleasant and more fun to start this early, because that gives you the luxury of reflection throughout the entire process. And throughout that process, like I mentioned, we are here to help you choose an award type and country. That's our first meeting, is really just thinking, what are the strategies people use? How do I know what countries to pick? How do I know what countries are looking for? And we'll also help think through project design, rationale for your proposal, if you're, whichever direction you're going. And then once you begin drafting and revising, we're here to read and review multiple drafts. So I don't know if you all recall, Nia, I know we had a shorter timeline. Do you remember how many drafts we got through in that couple of weeks?
I think 3 good drafts.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty good. And Chandler, I remember going through quite a few with you.
Yeah, I believe just with you was 3 drafts, and I talked with other members for ONSA as well.
Yeah. So on average, we've crunched the numbers. On average, we review 7 drafts for every successful applicant. And I'm not promising that's the magic number. That's just what the data say. And some people are more than that, a lot more than that. And some people, maybe are more efficient between drafts. But the point is that, do expect this to be an iterative process. And there is a major essay, right, that describes your project purpose. And then 3 shorter essays that describe things like the community engagement, a time when you had to step forth and show some leadership, ideas for community engagement, things like that. We'll also prep for interviews, because we do campus interviews at ASU as part of the final evaluation process. And then many countries also have interviews for the finalist stage. Not all, but many do. So the point is, you're not doing this alone. So complete that step 1 by May 31, and proven higher success rates, access to our full resources, guaranteed draft reviews, all that kind of stuff. And so your first steps really, and I'm about to give you the QR code, is your first step, if you haven't done so already, would be to complete our intake questionnaire. And this really gets you into our advising ecosystem. We then can identify you, we're sending you the right messages at the right time. And then, as you continue through the process, you're in that database, you're in that ecosystem. So that's really your first step, is just to kind of see where you are and register your interest. Once you receive a follow-up email from us, you'll get instructions for how to schedule your first meeting, which again, I would do as quickly as possible. So there's that QR code. As well, you can find a full overview of this timeline, our process, at fulbright.asu.edu. And so there were quite a few questions. If you have further questions, now would be a good time. So for those of you that didn't, the last one that came in about language proficiency, this is a good one worth addressing. the requirements vary by country. And so that's one of the pieces of information you'll want to look at as you're looking at different countries. I can tell you off the top of my head, every country in Central and South America is going to require or recommend intermediate Spanish, for instance. At the other end of the spectrum, none of the countries in the East Asia Pacific region expect foreign language proficiency for ETAs. And at the end of the day, you also need as much as you need to do what you want to do, right? So if you're doing a research project that would involve you getting involved with the community, doing interviews, things like that, even if they don't state a minimum language requirement, obviously you're going to need that because that's part of your feasibility. And it is helpful, right? If you happen to speak, Wolof, and you're going to a country that speaks it, even though it's not required, it would obviously enhance your opportunity to engage in cultural exchange, right? And I would assume then if you've studied a foreign language, you've also got good cross-cultural communication skills as well. So it's another well, it depends. Do you need prior research experience to get a research grant? Yeah, I mean, I've got some answers for that, but Chandler, maybe talk a little bit about what you had been doing before you embarked on this. And again, this is the graduate degree award, not strictly an independent research grant, but what was your preparation like?
Throughout my undergrad, I had done very limited research work, and it was not a hindrance to me. And after speaking with the commission here, they saw in my essay more of a focus, I've already reached out and started collaboration with future colleagues, and that was of more importance to them than my CV itself.
Yeah. Agree. The affiliation is very important. The simplest way I'll answer that question is whatever it is you're proposing to do, there needs to be strong evidence that you're able to succeed at it. So if you're proposing a 10-month long research project and you don't have any previous research experience and you don't understand the research methods, and nobody can write a letter that would vouch for your ability to do this, and you don't have a strong affiliation, it doesn't really matter how good your idea is. Conversely, if you do have a very strong CV and you have a ton of research experience, if you don't articulate a clear project or clear objectives, that's also a problem. So there's not a strict rubric in Fulbright, right? They're looking for you to give them a reason to say yes, is how I would best say it. Now, there were some questions as well about prior teaching experience. If you're applying for ETA, do you need to have teaching experience? Neil, what was your previous teaching, mentoring, coaching experience like before you applied for ETA?
I've been an educator for 10 years, but the ETA Fulbright program takes in a lot of, students out of undergrad who may not have um, formal teaching experience. And so where there is not, enough or any teaching experience, they do look at your leadership roles,
Mhm.
how you work with groups, how you are you in a leadership role in any clubs, things like that, go
Mhm.
along too.
Yeah, and so they're really looking for potential for transferable skills. So, I mean, what I tell people is any experience trying to teach something to anyone, right? So you have an understanding of how you would actually do this, right? What are your ideas for classroom management? What are your ideas for lessons? And so if you've been a coach, if you've been a mentor, a teaching assistant, anything along those lines, that's a virtue. They don't expect that you have previously taught English. They don't expect that you have TESOL training. They actually do provide that for you. So don't think that just because you haven't been a teacher or that you don't want to be a teacher in the future, that precludes you from applying for ETA. Generally, they're just looking for good, proactive people that have some sense of self and are going to get out there and just really put the effort into it. A couple more questions here. Does reaching, researching, and supporting specific relatively isolated indigenous groups count as research or ETA? Is there overlap between the two? That's actually a good question. You might have noticed on Nia's slide and in her presentation, she mentioned supplementary or secondary project. For many ETA programs, they will either allow you to, or in some cases, even expect you to pursue a supplementary project. Now, before I explain that, some other countries also will say you don't have time for that, or no, you don't need to propose that. But Nia, could you talk a little bit about what that phrase means, supplementary project, what the expectations are as far as you understand it?
Yeah, the supplementary project is a way to really become that cultural ambassador that they want you to be. So engaging with a community, whether it's a refugee community or an indigenous community or a community that is interested in a specific industry, um, just having a sense of where that community is and what you want to do with the community and how you want to work with them is important.
Mhm. Absolutely.
If I could quickly add on, we had a ETA here who was working at a all Romani school, and that was a huge plus. And I'd hear time and time again in conversations about how that made her stand out in her application, and knowing not only the local communities, but the minorities of the local communities showed that she had done her research and that she was a good fit for this host country.
Yeah. Um, Couple of really good questions in here that honestly will be answered in the intake meetings, right? That's really the point of them in terms of strategies for selecting a country and how do we get into the nitty-gritty of that. It really helps to sit down and like look through the website together. Michael asked a good question about making the case for a country for which you have little previous experience, right? And I think as long as you can mount an argument, in Chandler's case, the strength of their mathematics programs in Budapest has been widely known for decades, right? For years, it's been one of the best and most viable options for mathematics majors who want to do a summer study abroad is to go do their summer math program, right? So in some cases, it's the strength of the topic, or there's particular relevance there, or there's some area of strength that's drawing you there. In some cases, maybe, like in Nia's case, previous work, right, or connection to the future work. But the point is, in either case, it's going to take a little imagination, and as long as you can make the argument, that's perfectly fine. As I mentioned, the intake meetings, a good question about that is really, again, we're going to focus in on, where you are, get a quick triage of where you are in your thinking, but really focus in on how to read the country summaries, how to make good choices about the award types, how to interpret and navigate the different parts of the Fulbright website, which is actually pretty big. So, but good. Yeah, Erica asked a really good and basic question that probably should have been covered up front. You can submit one Fulbright application per year. So that's why we're putting so much emphasis on this award selection and country selection, because you can apply for one award to one country per year. Even with that restriction, they generally receive over 11,000 applications per year. So my guess is that they have a little interest in opening it up to more than one per student. So a good question. Good. I know we bypassed a couple. Were there any final questions that we'd like to ask our panelists, our Fulbright alumni? Yes, there are more questions. One of the questions that Sophie had previously asked, and I think this is a good sort of heading towards wrap-up question, is sitting from where you are right now, what advice would you give to, say, an undergraduate senior who's thinking about starting this process?
Uh, I'd say look now, look early, and to really build connections with professors or enhance those connections because letters of recommendation are one of the foundations of the application. Having a strong letter can go very far.
Mhm.
And I had two very good relationships and one that was more newer come application time. And I feel as though the the two very solid recommendation letters are part of the reason I'm here today.
Absolutely.
I would echo that. Please don't be me. Do not apply minutes before a deadline. But I would also say that, you have this huge window of time to not just apply, but to really still have some formative experiences in your life. But before, was it October, early October when they start doing the
Yeah, our
um,
campus deadline is September 8th. Yeah, by October.
Yeah, so if there's something that you worked on and you're wanting to grow and talk about it in an application later, take this time to do that as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think worth the pause too and talk a little bit about references. Again, it's one of the things we'll talk about in the intake meetings, but worth thinking about. All forward applications require three recommendations. In the case of study research, that would be full letters of recommendation. In the case of the ETA, it's three recommendation forms. One of the questions asked, is it bad to get all professors? And again, the answer is it depends. It really depends on the nature of the work. So in Chandler's case, who was applying for graduate study, yeah, we would want to see some academic letters of reference to lend some credence to his claim that he could be admitted to and succeed in this graduate program. ETA actually specifies that one of your three recommendations should not be a faculty member, because the questions that they ask in that form do have a lot to do with your ability to work with groups, to show leadership in a classroom, and those kinds of things. So that's one of the things we'll strategize and talk about. Who are the good options for you? When's a good time to approach them? We have memoranda of guidance that we actually give you to give to the people writing your recommendations, and we help you manage that entire process. Um, yeah, this is a great question as well to both of you. What was the most significant challenge that you didn't expect about the program as a whole, either in the application process or on the ground once you're there?
For me, surprisingly enough, it was a visa issue. Uh, by the time I submitted my Fulbright application, uh, Hungary allowed students to bring spouses. And by the time I ended up getting accepted into the program, Hungary no longer allowed spouses to enter the country on student visas. So that caused a bit of a panic once we got here. But working with Fulbright Commission and the university, we were able to find a solution to the problem.
Mhm.
It One of the phrases I've been told here, I'm sure it's different from host country to country and what connections you have, but there's typically someone or something that you can do to soften a problem.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that there are just so many challenges that I faced coming here just because Uganda is a challenging environment. It's very different from America in terms of communication, how people, view time and things like that. So even though I had been here previously, there was this like kind of learning curve again. Um, and to that, it requires a lot of flexibility, especially knowing that I was going back there. I knew that I had to be flexible. So, I mean, that's a challenge every day, becoming more and more flexible.
Right. Yeah, flexibility and adaptability are the name of the game. I'll address one easily answered question, and then we'll finish up with, I think, a good broad question. You've heard Chandler talking about bringing a partner. Many countries do allow for dependent support. And so you'll see that clearly designated in the country summary. And what that means is that they have the structure set up for you to bring a dependent, whether that's a spouse or a child. No friends. There has to be an actual legal relationship here. And they will provide an increased stipend. And so that could be just a few $100s a month, but a little extra. And so we've had Fulbrighters every year who take their children or who take a spouse. Uh, Pets, that's gonna, it really depends on what the laws of that country are. Most countries have pretty strict quarantine laws about bringing in strange animals from other countries. Don't even get going about the UK and how long you're gonna have to keep your cat in quarantine, right? Um, I would think that it's probably way more hassle than it's worth, and I don't know if any of our Fulbrighters have taken a pet with them. Um, if they have, they haven't told me about it, and maybe they didn't tell IIE about it, but it's pretty complicated to do so. Um, yeah, the one question I thought it'd be good to wrap up with was actually, at any point in the process, did you all ever feel like you just weren't competitive enough for this? And how did you handle that feeling, which is a feeling almost every applicant feels at some point?
Yeah, there's always an element of uncertainty, Am I the best for this? What are they looking for? You don't know. And they're not just certainly going to like call you up and say, "Hey, I saw your application, but we're looking for this." But I think the way to handle it is just to ground yourself in who you are and what your mission is. Because even if your ideas or projects and dreams and hopes aren't going in the Fulbright direction, it doesn't mean that those ideas aren't good in
Right.
general. You just need the best audience for it. Um, so we absolutely hope that all of you will get, but some people won't. That's the reality of
Mm.
things. But just have faith and ground yourself in the strength of your own ideas.
I have to completely agree with Niall. Know who you are, know what your strengths are, best articulate those, and fingers crossed after you press submit.
Yeah. Yes, we celebrate the submission just as much as we celebrate the outcomes, right? Because this is a big achievement to go through this process and to put yourself out there like that. And so we like to celebrate that quite a bit. So looking forward to seeing you all at our I Hit Submit party in the fall, right? Between now and then, there's a lot of work to be done. So as I said, get yourself in the intake questionnaire. You can find that either through that QR code or through fulbright.asu.edu. And if you can't find any of that, just email us at onsa.asu.edu. And then we'll take it from there. We'll give you guidance on how to schedule your first intake meeting. And then we get from there, we'll have a getting ready to write meeting, and then we'll get drafting. And before you know it, it'll be summer and you'll be writing your one true application. So Nia, Chandler, thank you so much for donating your time to us. As always, lovely to see you and wonderful to see you again. I'm glad you're able to join us.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you so much for having us. Yeah, and good luck to all of you.
Great. Well, thank you all.